Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental, really. It's that constant tension you find in, well, many workplaces, especially high-stakes ones like aircraft manufacturing. How do you balance safety with, actually getting the work done?
Exactly. It's a critical tightrope walk. And for this deep dive, we're looking at some really interesting research, a survey from two aircraft manufacturing plants over in Australia.
Right.
And our mission, so to speak, is to understand how the workers themselves, the ones on the floor, actually perceive this balance. What shapes their view on safety versus productivity?
Yeah, getting beyond just policies on paper to what it feels like on the ground.
Mm.
So listeners can expect insights into how aware employees really are about safety rules, about human factors, things like fatigue, stress, communication breakdowns,
All of that stuff that impacts how we work.
and how effectively that information is actually communicated down from managers and supervisors. Ultimately, how does safety really stack up against that relentless pressure to produce?
And there are some, well, let's say surprising twists in this research. It definitely challenges some common assumptions.
Okay, intriguing. So tell us a bit about how they actually gathered this information. You mentioned a survey.
Yeah, exactly. They used a questionnaire distributed to workers at two different Australian aircraft manufacturing facilities. One was larger, one was smaller, which is a useful comparison point.
Okay, a questionnaire. Makes sense for getting a broad snapshot. What kinds of things were they asking? What were the core questions?
They were really zoning in on three key areas. First, how much do employees actually lean towards safety when productivity is pushing back?
Right. Where does their personal priority lie?
Second, how aware are they of the impact of safety rules and those human factors on their own work performance? And third, how good is the communication about all this coming from the top-down managers, supervisors?
Got it. Safety preference, awareness, and communication effectiveness. But how do you measure something like preference? It's a bit subjective, isn't it?
Good question. They mainly use something called a Likert scale. You know those scales where you rate how much you agree or disagree with a statement?
Oh, yeah, like strongly agree to strongly disagree.
Exactly. So statements like, I always prioritize safety even if it slows things down, workers rate their agreement. Then all these answers were analyzed statistically. And importantly, they looked at things like the company size, how long someone had worked there, whether they were full-time or maybe an apprentice.
Ah, so looking for patterns based on those factors, too. Okay, so they've got all this data. What jumps out? What's the big picture?
Well, the headline finding really was that across the board, safety and productivity seemed, well, pretty equally balanced in how workers saw them.
Equally balanced. So not like safety is always winning or productivity always winning.
Precisely. It's crucial to understand. It doesn't mean safety was always the #1 priority in every single action.
Yeah.
It suggests more of a constant negotiation, a day-to-day juggling act by the employees themselves.
Okay, that makes sense. A continuous trade-off. What about awareness levels?
Generally pretty good. The research indicated that workers mostly showed, a decent understanding of how human factors, fatigue, distractions, whatever, and the safety rules affect their jobs. And they also generally felt their supervisors communicated adequately about these things.
So far, so good then. People seem aware. Communication seems okay.
It seems like a reasonable baseline, yeah. But here's where it gets more nuanced. They found a really strong linker, a significant correlation between someone having a stronger personal preference for safety over productivity and them having a higher awareness of human factors and safety rules.
Okay, that fits, right. The more you understand the risks and the rules, the more likely you are to prioritize being safe. Seems logical.
Totally logical. Knowledge is power, as they say. But, and this is the really fascinating bit, the kind of aha moment, that preference for safety was not significantly linked to the amount of safety communication people reported getting.
Wait, say that again. More communication didn't equal a stronger preference for safety.
Exactly. Just having more safety meetings or getting more emails about safety didn't automatically translate into people saying they prioritize safety more strongly in their daily choices.
Wow. Okay, that definitely pushes back against the idea that just talking more about safety fixes everything.
It really does. Now, digging a bit deeper, they also found some interesting differences based on demographics and specific questions. For example, workers at Plant B, that was the smaller one, they rated communication about safety much more positively.
More positively how?
Like communication about safety for regular tasks, for new tasks, whether they felt their concerns were passed up to management effectively, and whether management actually understood the work they did. Plant B scored higher on all those compared to Plant A, the bigger site.
Yeah, that kind of rings true. Smaller place, maybe shorter lines of communication, less bureaucracy.
That's probably a big part of it, yeah. Closer relationships, perhaps. But interestingly, workers at Plant A, the larger place, were actually more likely to say they'd stop work if the right equipment wasn't available.
Huh. So maybe more formal adherence to rules in the bigger company, less willingness to sort of make do.
Possibly. Maybe stricter procedures or just a different culture around stopping work. It's an interesting contrast.
Definitely. What about experience? Did how long someone had worked there make a difference?
Yes, it did. People with longer employment, say more years in the same company, they showed a better grasp that errors usually aren't just one person's fault.
Ah, they see the bigger picture.
Exactly. They were more likely to see errors coming from the whole system, the interactions between people, tools, the environment, a more systemic view, you could say.
That makes sense. You see more patterns over time, I guess. Fewer simple answers.
Right. And one other finding on demographics, full-time employees felt less like repetitive tasks made them lose focus compared to apprentices.
Okay, maybe just more used to it or different expectations.
Could be experience, familiarity, maybe even training differences. Lots of potential factors there.
Okay, so definitely some nuances depending on the plant size and employee background. Now, let's circle back to those correlations with safety preference. You said awareness mattered, but communication amount didn't always.
Right. So specifically within Plant A, the large facility, and also for people who'd been there a shorter time, like 0 to 5 years, and for full-timers. For those groups, having a stronger awareness of human factors and safety rules was significantly tied to preferring safety over productivity.
Okay, so for those specific groups, the link between knowing about safety and prioritizing safety was clear.
Yes, and here's that really counterintuitive finding, again, for workers with longer employment, 6 years or more.
Yeah.
For them, reporting more communication about safety was actually associated with a lower preference for prioritizing safety.
That's bizarre. More safety talk equals less safety focus for the experienced folks. How does that even work? Are they tuning it out? Does it feel irrelevant?
Those are exactly the questions this raises. It's a really striking finding. It suggests the relationship isn't simple, maybe the type of communication isn't landing, or maybe it even creates some kind of resistance or complacency. We need to unpack that.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the discussion then. We've got this picture, a balancing act, decent awareness, but this really complex, sometimes negative link with communication volume, especially for veterans. What does it all mean?
Well, that core finding about workers navigating a trade-off between efficiency and thoroughness, it really highlights this ongoing daily negotiation. It suggests employees are actively, self-regulating. They're making real-time judgments based on production demands versus their understanding of safety needs.
Like a constant internal risk assessment playing out. Can I do this quickly and safely?
Pretty much. And the key takeaway, I think, is that stark contrast between awareness and communication volume. Awareness of human factors and rules does seem to push people towards safety. But just pumping out more safety messages doesn't automatically yield the same result. And for some, like those long-tenured staff, it might even backfire slightly.
Which really challenges that whole more is better approach to safety comms.
Completely. It forces us to ask, if just more talk isn't the answer, what is? Is it the quality, the relevance, the delivery method?
And thinking about those demographic differences, the smaller plan having better rated communication.
Right. That hints that organizational structure really matters. Maybe fewer management layers, closer teams. It just makes communication flow better, feel more two-way perhaps. People might feel more heard in a smaller setting.
That feels right. Easier to just grab a supervisor, maybe.
Yeah.
And what about the experience differences? Newer folks finding repetition harder? Experienced folks seeing the system?
Yeah, the apprentice finding might just be about developing skills, needing more conscious effort for tasks that are automatic for veterans. And the experienced workers, seeing the system that's likely just accumulated wisdom, right? They see near misses. They understand how different parts of the process interact to create risk, not just individual slip-ups.
Learning from experience, seeing the connections.
Exactly. And that finding about experienced staff reacting potentially negatively to more communication, that really puts the spotlight on the quality and relevance of the message. Are we just telling seasoned professionals things they've known for 20 years?
Or is the communication engaging? Does it address the complex issues they face or just rehash basics?
Precisely. Maybe they feel their own expertise isn't valued or the communication isn't tailored to their level. It could feel patronizing even.
So it's not just about volume, it's about targeted, relevant, maybe more sophisticated communication for different groups.
That seems to be the strong implication. A one-size-fits-all safety message probably isn't cutting it. What works for an apprentice is different from what an experienced technician needs to hear or discuss.
Okay, this has been fascinating. We've explored the balance, the awareness, the complex communication picture. Let's try and summarize. What are the main conclusions we should be drawing from this deep dive?
I think the number one takeaway is this. While workers in these places seem to manage a balance between getting the job done and staying safe, and they generally know the basics of safety, that link between how much you talk about safety and how much people prioritize it is definitely not straightforward. It's not guaranteed.
So, organizations can't just rely on cranking up the volume on safety messages and expect a safer culture to automatically follow.
Absolutely not. This research really hammers home the need to tailor safety efforts, training, communication, everything to the specific people you're talking to, their experience level, their role, maybe even the size of their specific site. It all matters.
A more nuanced, targeted approach is needed.
Definitely. And, we have to remember, this is a pilot study. It's 2 plants, 1 industry, 1 country. So we need to be a bit cautious about generalizing too broadly. More research in different settings would be great to see if these patterns hold.
Good point. Limitations are always important, but it certainly gives us a lot to think about. So as we wrap up, what's a final thought to leave our listeners mulling over?
I'd say just reflect on any system you know well, your own workplace, maybe something else entirely. How is that balance between getting stuff done and doing it safely really managed on the ground? And when it comes to safety messages, is more always better?
Yeah.
Or is it the way information is shared, how relevant it feels, how much it genuinely connects with people's experience? Is that what truly makes a difference in keeping safety front and center? Something to chew on.